Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to my today's presentation about Flutter. My name is Hazem Saleh. I'm working in Viacom, New York as a software architect. Today I will be talking about building our first iOS and Android application using Flutter in less than or equal 30 minutes. So let's see how it will go. This is the agenda. Again, this presentation is really a practical presentation. I will not say so much theory, but in the beginning, I will just give very high-level overview about Flutter, how it works behind the scene, and we will start doing code, okay? So how many of us has used Flutter? This is nice. So even if you didn't use Flutter, it's no problem. This presentation will really enable you to start using it after just completing this presentation. So how Flutter works? What is Flutter actually? Flutter is a platform which allows us to create cross-mobile platform applications on Android and on iOS. It also allows us to create desktop applications. But the topic of this session today is about mobile mainly. So it gives us the ability to create cross-platform applications in Android and iOS using one code base. This code base is written using some programming language called Dart. I will show you Dart today. You will feel so familiar with Dart even if you have never used it before. So this diagram here shows us how Flutter works behind the scene. So you write your code, your Flutter code using Dart. You develop your widgets, your application logic using Dart. And Flutter SDK will take this code and will compile it into native code that can work natively and perfectly on iOS and on Android. You may ask yourself a question now, okay, so yeah, is this another React Native? Is this another Cordova? My answer to you is no. Definitely it is not React Native, it is not Cordova. So how can we compare it with versus React Native and versus Cordova? Flutter is using Dart. React Native and Cordova, they are using JavaScript, and React Native is using React.js, which is a JavaScript framework. In Cordova, you can use whatever JavaScript framework that can work on the top of WebView. One of the biggest advantages of Flutter is it totally gives you fully compiled native application, which gives you the best possible performance because it takes your code and generates the native code that can work on Android and iOS. React Native doesn't really give you this. React Native gives you partially compiled native application because of, you have JavaScript bridge that communicates with native JavaScript threads that communicates with native threads through some sort of bridge using WebSockets. This can cause actually some overhead in the application performance. So Flutter really doesn't have this restriction. Cordova, the web app, it is like a web application that works inside the web view, so it really doesn't give you any compiled native application capability. Flutter, one of the most important things that you need to know about Flutter is the default app material library in Flutter doesn't give you one-to-one mapping to the operating systems that you are trying to target. So if you have like Flutter button, this Flutter button in the app material will not really look like the native button in iOS or the native button in Android. You can. There are some techniques which can allow you to create native UI using Flutter. However, this is not really the default way. Flutter controls every pixel on the screen. It has some library called Skya. Skya is like a graphics engine that Flutter is using in order to draw every pixel on the screen in order to make sure that it will be as efficient as possible. React Native compiles every UI widget that you have to the native widget in the operating system you are targeting. And Apache Cordova, it is a web component which you can, like play with CSS in order to make it looks like native. Flutter gives you the ability to create cross-mobile and web and desktop applications. React Native is only for mobile, iOS, and Android. Cordova is also like Flutter. It allows you to create cross-platform mobile applications. However, the idea is totally different. So what is Dart? Dart, if you are a Java developer, if you are a JavaScript developer, if you are C++ developer, you will feel so familiar with Dart. We will code together with Dart, and we will see how it is really smooth. It is object-oriented language, a strongly typed language, has functions, has classes, has strings, has numbers, has lists, has maps, has everything that you really use in a modern programming language, and it is really an efficient one that is created by Google. The last theoretical slide here is about a Flutter idea. In Flutter, in order to build your application, you have to realize that you are building a tree of widgets. I will show you in the demo how can you design this widget tree before even start doing your code. So your app UI is about tree of widgets. So if you have some button that has word hello world, for example, how would you represent this in Flutter? You will have like home page widget that contains a bar, and can contain a button as a children of the home page widget. And as a children of the button widget, you can have like a label widget or a text widget that contains this text. So this is how we are constructing our user interface in Flutter. It is tree based. Flutter controls every pixel on the screen using a graphics engine called Sky. And in Flutter, there is an important concept called, for widgets, every widget can be either stateful or stateless. What does it mean by stateful? What does it mean by stateless? A stateless widget is just like a dummy UI component that doesn't control the state. It takes some data, and it just represents this data on the screen. A stateful widget is a widget that manages the state, and it can render this state, or it can delegate rendering this state to children widgets, children stateless widgets. So I will show you this in a demo to realize how you can really build your application using this concept. If you understand this concept, building your application in Flutter will be like a 10 minutes operation. You will really start doing this after this session. So let's start building our first application using Flutter. So first of all, in order to start working with Flutter, go and download Flutter. So once you download Flutter and install it in your operating system, it will be available in the command line. So we can cd to certain directory here. Can you see this well? So in order to start creating our first Flutter app, what we need to say is Flutter create. And then we gave the application name. So let's give it like hello world. Hello underscore world 2019, okay? And click enter. As we see, there is a new Flutter version. And this is really one of the greatest benefits of Flutter. Every while there is some update, there are some bug fixes, there are some improvements to the library. It is really a great community with active development. So now the application is created. We can either cd to the application directory and run it, or we can start importing this in our IDE. There are many IDEs that you can use to do Flutter application. You can use Android Studio, but in this session, I will use something else. I will use Visual Studio Code because it is really a great IDE. So let's start exploring this application. So what I will do here, I will open, file open, and I will go to like the project, Hello World project, and we'll start opening it. This is really what you see. Yeah, this is really what you have, this generation. I will go with the details of this generation, so don't be afraid. Let's start running this application to see how it will work. So let's start running it in iOS. We can actually run it in iOS, running it in Android with no problems. So let's see how it will work. One of the greatest advantages here is that we have, like I said, we have one code base which can work natively in Android and in iOS. So let's run. This application. As we see, this is really the Hello World project that you have from the default Flutter create command. So you have here some app bar, you have a label, you have pushed this button how many times, and whenever you click this button, you see the number. Nice, really nice Hello World. So let's see how we can start customizing this. Let's see the bits of Flutter here. So when we say Flutter create, by default, we have Android folder and iOS folder that contains the native generations of this project. You should not touch this for the scope of this session. Your code exists here under the lib directory. So here, this is the main .dart. This is the file that contains the application, the Hello World application code. So what we have here is we have home page. This home page is having some state. This state here is some counter, some integer counter that is initialized to 0 and will be incremented whenever something happens, whenever this button is clicked. So we have the state here stored in this state class, and whenever we click the button, we increment this counter by 1. Here the build method contains how we would build this widget. Like I said, in Flutter, we have our application is a set or is a tree of set of widgets. So here we have, this is the root, scaffold, and here it has a app bar and it has a body, and this body have some column under which we place all of our widgets here. So we have mainly here in the three leaves, we have a text widget that say you have pushed this button this many times, and another text widget which is containing a reference to the counter variable, okay? And this is at the end is a floating action button that we see here. And on press we call increment counter, and that it is. So let's start customizing this and see how our customization can be communicated as seamless as possible. So I am now a developer and I'm working on this application. I would like to do some customization. So product people asks me to, like customize this somehow to make it like, instead of displaying this message, let's say I would like to display the number of clicks first and then followed by some word like times. So let's see how this will go. So what I can do here is I can remove this text and I can say times. And here just notice what I will do. I should save and redeploy, right? In Flutter, you don't really need to do this. You just save, and the change is automatically being communicated to the device that is connected to the IDE. Flutter really implements the idea of what you see is what you really get. This allows you to quickly develop your application without having to wait a lot of time for the IDE or for the emulator or for the installation. You don't really have to do this in Flutter. We can add here more changes. It is communicated so much easy. We can change the style and actually increase the font size. All of this is being done seamlessly. You don't have to restart your emulator at all. So now let's start, like talking about the applications that we would like to build. What we will build now is a knowledge checker application. What it is about, you will open the app and you will be asked some general questions, and you will be introduced to the screens that asks you these questions. And once you finish, there is some summary page which will tell you how many correct answers do you have from this application. So if we have a problem like this, with multiple screens to show the quiz, and at the end of the day with a result to show how many correct answers do we have in Flutter. So how would we design something like this? The first step that you need to do is to start drawing the widget tree that you would like to have. What we need to have here is a home page. This home page will contain quiz widget, which will contain the text of the question and the possible answers, right? Question text and possible answers, right? So you can also decompose this widget into more smaller widgets. This is one of the best practices to make sure that you have as small widgets as possible in order to manage them easily and in order to use them in different contexts. So this quiz widget here, we can break it down into question widget and answer widget. The question widget now will display the question text, and the answer widget will display the button of the answer and the answer text. And whenever we click any answer, it should have the handler that is defined when an answer is clicked in order to verify if this answer is correct and change the application state with how many correct answers do we have. The other thing that we need to also model is what is the state that we have here. In Flutter, UI is a function of a state. So what is the state that we should have here? We should have what is the current question index that I have now, and what is the current correct number of answers. This is the state that we have. So whenever the user click any answer, we will verify if this answer is correct or not. If it is correct, we will increment the answers by 1. And under all the cases, we will increase the index of the current question by 1. Who should manage this state? The parent widget, the home widget. In Flutter, one of the greatest lessons that I have learned is try to centralize the state management as much as you can. So the home component here, or the home widget here, is the guy that will manage the state. And in order to render this state and the data, it will delegate the rendering to the quiz, and the quiz widget will delegate this to the question widget and to the answer widget. Okay, the user select answer number 1, and then go to the second question, third question, and he finish the quiz. He will finish the quiz when the current question index is equal to the length of the current questions, right? So in this case, we should have another widget, which is called the result widget, that will replace the quiz widget, and it will display how many correct answers do we have out of the many questions that that the user is introduced to. Any questions about this before getting inside the code? So before doing the code, we have to model this tree in our mind and ask ourselves what is the state that we would like to manage in order to make the implementation as easy as possible. It will be so easy to implement after having this tree. So let's go and see, let's build this application incrementally. We will have a stub of this application that has like a placeholder for all of these widgets, and we will implement each of these widgets separately and incrementally also. So let's open the stub of this application. So this is the stub of the application. Like we have agreed here, we have home widget, right? So this is the home widget that we have here. It has a state. The state here is containing the current question index and containing the number of correct answers. In the initially, they should be 0, right? The current question index should be 0. The current correct answers should be 0, right? And the list of questions, we can get this list of questions from feed or from remote service, or for the simplicity of this application, I just hard-coded them, like 3 questions. Every question here is having text, which will represent what is the question that I'm asking now. The second thing is possible answers. What are the possible answers that we have? And the last field in this data structure is correct answer index. I will use this correct answer index in order to match if the user selection is equal to the correct index. If it is equal to the correct index, I will increase answers by 1. If not, I will not increase answers at all, correct answers at all. Any questions so far? Okay, so again, what I'm doing here is a state management. So I define my state, I define my data. Then what are the actions that I should have? The main actions is when a user click an answer, right? So when an answer is clicked, what we will have the correct answer and the user answer, and we'll match them. If they are equal to each other, then we will increase the correct answers by 1. If not, we will not change the correct answers. And whatever the user answer, correct answer or not, we will always increase the current question index by 1 in order to change the application state to the next question. Finally, I will have like an API in order to restore the state to the initial state. It is like a state machine here. So if the user is finished and he would like to restart the quiz, calling this restart quiz method will reset the state and will allow him to restart the quiz. So this is the state. And it is managed in the main root widget that we have. Now let's start seeing what else we have. We have quiz component and question, answer, and the result. So this is the question component that we have. There is no implementation yet for this. We will implement this. And this is the quiz component, which includes the question and answers. And this is the answer component that renders a button and have the handler that will be called when an answer is clicked. And finally, we should have a result widget which will display how many correct answers do we have. So let's start running this and build this incrementally, seeing the user interface being built with every line of code that we write and save. So we have here a build method, which, like I said, it allows us to create the widget. So whenever we have this build widget, we prepare what is the current question text, what is the current answer list, and what is the correct answer, in order to give them as parameters to the children component, because this is represent the current or the actual state that we have now. So the main component, the main widget, will get this state and will pass this state to the children widgets in order to render them. As we see here, the app is empty, right? Let's start adding implementation here. So in our body here, if the current question index is less than the question length, what we should show here, where our design is the quiz, right? So let's instantiate the quiz widget here. In Java, if you are a Java developer, in order to instantiate an object, you need to say new object, right? In Dart, you can say new object, or you can just eliminate new. It is so familiar with you. Again, like I said, you really don't need to learn a Dart. You can start using your old background and maybe checking the online manual for very few minutes and start doing your code. It is not a new language. It is something that you are really familiar with, because it doesn't really have, like new paradigm shift. It really takes many concepts from all of these programming languages. So what we need to have here in the quiz is, we need to have the question text, right? What is the question text that should be displayed here? So this is something called named argument. It exists in many programming languages. So what we will pass here for question text, we will pass the current question text in the current state. What else? We need also, in this parent widget, we need to have the answers, right? So let's pass the answers list. One of the good things that we should always do is to format the code. So let's do some code formatting. What else do we need here for the quiz in order to operate correctly is the current correct answer, right? So we will pass here the correct answer. And finally, the handler that will be called when the answer is clicked. It's called answer clicked. Let's save. We see nothing because we didn't implement yet the children components of the quiz. So let's drill down. So in order to drill down, control click or command click if you are on Mac. So this is the quiz here. In the quiz component, it takes the question, the answer, the possible answers, and the correct answers, and the handler. What it will be doing here, it will call the question widget, it will draw the question widget, and for every answer, it will draw a button that represents this answer, and will pass the answer text and the answer click handler. So now we are here. So let's get down into the question widget. The question widget here, what does it have? Some question, and we would like to display it somehow. So let's start displaying this somehow. Question is a children of quiz, which is a children of home. Now we would like to display some text. So we should add some child text under the question. If you realize this paradigm, developing Flutter applications will be so easy with you. So here I will have some child. And what I will add here, some text, which is displaying the question. Text here is some widget, which you give some text, and it just renders this on the screen. Let's save. You see, we started to see the first thing. We started to see the question text. Okay. But this is really doesn't look cool, right? We need to do some styling here. So let's do some styling here. There's some style attribute here, which you can say text style, and here you can add some font color, for example, font size. Let's make it like 20. So we started to see the first part of the quiz, which is the question part. Let's format this guy. All right. So now we implemented this leaf here. We implemented the question widget. Let's go to the answer widget and implement it in order to have the complete quiz in action. The answer widget here is having a text, is having a handler that will be called when the answer is clicked, right? So what we need to have here is a button that has the text of the answer and some on-press delegate that will be called when answer selected handler is invoked. So let's build this. So under the answer widget here, I will create button, right? So to have buttons in Flutter, there are so many ways, but one of the popular buttons is raised button. This button will have some text, right? Text is another widget. So we'll attach a text widget to the raised button. And here we will have this dot text and save. You see, we started to see all of the possible answers. Flutter is a very smart framework. Why it is very smart framework? If this button doesn't have an associated handler, it will disable this by default for you. So let's add the handler and see what will happen here. So here on pressed, whenever this button is pressed, we will call the answer selected handler. Save. You see. That will be called when this button is clicked. This is one of the greatest things about Flutter. It really answers many questions for you as a developer without, without having to do many lines of code. Now let's style this somehow. This doesn't really look nice. So first of all, we need to make sure that these buttons will be wide. So in order to do this, we can define a width on the parent container here, which is like the layout. So I would say here double dot infinity. This is one of the ways to make sure that the layout will be equal to the screen width. Now we would like also to make like better colors here. So let's have like some blue color for this button, and for the text, let's have it like white. You see, guys, I'm adding code, and this code is attached directly to the IDE. This is like a dream. For me, as a mobile developer, this is really like a dream. So now we have the quiz widget. Can you imagine this in 15 minutes, we implemented the whole part here. We implemented the quiz, the questions, and answers. So let's start answering some of these questions. What is the largest city in the world? I would say Mumbai. Let's see. What is the longest river in the world? Let's say Congo River. What is the tallest mountain in the world? Everest. Oh, nothing appear. Why is this? Because the result widget here is also not implemented, right? So let's start implementing it, and let's attach the behavior to this widget and see our implementation in action. So in the main file here, if the current question index is less than a question length, we will display the quiz. Else, we should display the result widget. The result widget here will take what does the state that it needs to have in order to properly render the data. It needs the total questions, the total correct answers, and a handler that will be called in order to reset the state and restart the quiz, right? So here, what we will have, the total questions. Let's start with the correct answers here. And then, what is the total number of questions? It is actually the question list.length. Let's format the code here. And finally, the restart quiz, which will be called if the user click restart quiz. Let's save. Nothing will appear here because we didn't implement it yet. So let's get into the result widget detail. So here in the result widget, what do we need to have? We need to have some text box, which will have, you have answered how many correct answers out of the total questions. And then we need to have some button which will allow us to restart the whole quiz, right? So here, I will have some text. Which say here, you have answered. In order to access variable, you put $sign and then the variable name. Out of total questions. Let's save and see. You see, guys? This is correct. We answered only one question, correct out of 3. So let's format this somehow here. Font size 20, let's format this. And now, let's add the button which will allow us to restart the quiz. I don't need like a regular raise the button. I would like to need some sort of link, you know. So there is some great button here which is called flat button that you can use specifically for this use case. So in this flat button here, we can have some children text which can say restart quiz. Save. Again, like it is disabled. Why it is disabled? Because it doesn't have binded handler yet. So let's bind the handler. On braced here, we will call this .restart quiz. Save. Let's add some colors here because it doesn't really look nice. So we will have here colors.blue. Save this guy. No, let's have like a text color. You see? Yeah. Let's format this. Now we have the app. So let's click restart the quiz. What is the largest city in the world? It is New York City. For your information, what is the longest river in the world? It is River Nile in Egypt. And the tallest mountain in the world is Everest. So you have answered 3 out of 3. We really are done. We build the whole app, as you see now, by realizing the widget tree, defining the state, and implementing every widget separately. So this is all about the, before finishing this, I would like to say that don't forget to visit Flutter NYC booth. It has a lot of great Flutter experts that can answer all of your questions about the topic. And don't forget to join our Flutter NYC meetups. And the source code of this app is existing under my GitHub. Feel free to download it, change it, comment it, and talk with me about this. I will do my best to answer all of your inquiries. All right, thanks everyone, and thanks for attending today.